The modern horror game is one that sticks pretty close to the blueprint laid out by Capcom's Resident Evil. Slow pacing, methodical puzzles, and by and large going short on action and long on tension. Midway's new game, The Suffering, goes for the horror thing with creepy monster design and startling visual trickery, but it also ditches most of the ammo conservation and slow pacing found in most horror-themed games. The end result is a much more action-packed game that might be a little too straightforward in spots, but it at least makes for a solid action game. In The Suffering, you'll play as a thick-sideburn death row inmate named Torque. Torque has been convicted of murdering his wife and 2 sons, and he's been sent to Abbott State Penitentiary, where the baddest of the bad go to die. However, he doesn't actually remember anything concerning their murder. After a brief intro, a bunch of creepy monsters attack the prison, slaying many of the guards and inmates alike. This leaves Torque free to explore and, hopefully, escape the prison island to safety. The game is pretty focused on combat against the game's various creatures. Each creature has its own tactics and abilities. Some will hang back and try to pelt you with projectile attacks. Others will attempt to get up close and personal. The hangmen will simply descend from the ceiling and attempt to choke the life out of you. And the burrowers you encounter later on pop up out of the ground and attempt to whip you with chains. Regardless of how they come at you, you'll have to learn quickly to fight back. You'll start out the game with a shiv, but before long you'll have amassed a small arsenal of pistols, Tommy guns, shotguns, flares, and flashbangs, as well as a flashlight to light the way, and painkillers to recover health. Torque also possesses the ability to transform into a huge lumbering monster packing powerful melee attacks, but it's often just easier to pick off your enemies from a distance. The game's pretty good at giving you a lot of targets to shoot at, and as a result you'll usually have more than enough ammo to deal with any situation, though the higher difficulty settings do toughen things up a bit. The action in The Suffering is spliced together with some light puzzle solving, mostly pushing around boxes or finding switches to open a door. On top of that, there are multiple ways to play the game depending on your disposition. You will come across other survivors, and you're presented with some options here. You can help them, you can ignore them, or you can just blow them away. These choices are tabulated behind the scenes, and you'll get one of 3 different endings depending on the choices you made throughout. The game controls like a first-person shooter, using the right stick to look around and the left stick to move. You can also play the game from the first-person perspective if you like. Inventory control is handled via the D-pad, though it would have been nice if you could change weapons more easily. The game's available on both the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and we'd have to give a slight edge to the Xbox control scheme. It just feels slightly more natural on the Xbox controller, and the game's auto-aim seems to track a little bit better in the Xbox version. Where The Suffering really scores is in its presentation. The game's monster design is interesting, with most monsters representing a different method of execution, from beheading to lethal injection. The way the slayers move is appropriately creepy, especially when they're grinding one sword along a nearby wall or floor as they run at you. So while you see all the tricks they have to offer fairly quickly, the monsters do make a great first impression. The rest of The Suffering looks pretty good too. The models aren't the most detailed ones in the world, and the environments aren't supremely detailed, but since most of the game is incredibly dark, you'll hardly notice. It also moves at a nice, smooth frame rate. The game's coolest effect, though, is how Torque gets completely covered in blood after close encounters. He just gets splattered. It's a very cool effect. As you might expect, the Xbox version of the game looks better than its PlayStation 2 counterpart, and the Xbox version goes the extra mile with widescreen 480p support. The PS2 version's frame rate isn't quite as solid, and the texture work isn't quite as clean, but beyond that, the 2 versions do look very similar. Great sound is key to making a horror game. The Suffering's sound is as great as it needs to be, with lots of strange ambient noise, good shrieking monster noises, and other cool little touches. The game's voice acting is a big standout as well. Though Torque himself stays silent, you'll hook up with a variety of characters and hear things like radio chatter and other speech throughout the game. All of it is very, very well done. The sense of fear and impending insanity really comes through in a lot of the dialogue. Also worth mentioning is that The Suffering has an extremely dirty script. The game's extreme language doesn't really feel out of place. I mean, you'd certainly expect that a bunch of surly prisoners would swear a lot, even more so when they're being attacked and killed by hellish creatures.
Will you shut the f*** up, you sack of
Between that and the game's high level of blood, The Suffering certainly earns its M rating. Though The Suffering tends to rely more on startling you with visual effects and sudden attacks than actually trying to scare you, the game is still a pretty refreshing take on horror-themed games. The game is a bit longer than you'd expect from a straightforward action game, though the increased length is offset by an overall lack of variety. More monsters, more ways to do them in, and perhaps some slightly more involving puzzles would have probably made the game feel more in-depth. But even taking that into consideration, The Suffering is a fun shooter that fans of action games will definitely get a kick out of.